All right, we're good.
Okay.
Jenn Alcorn,
Dave Schmidt.
thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So first of all, candidate for District 1 County Council here in 2026. So as I start out every one of these conversations, Jenn, what's your passion?
What's my passion? Well, you did tell me you were going to ask me this question.
Of course.
So I thought about it for a whole 5 minutes now. When I thought about this question, people is what came to mind. For me, I think my passion really centers around people. So I'm studying psychology. I've worked in the hospitality business, which is service-centered, all about people in all different ways, and HR. So human resources, recruitment, learning people on a very interesting level when you're looking for the right person for the job and they want the job, and having to deliver good news and bad news in that regard. So
back to that hospitality. I think that it is a moral imperative for people to serve at some point in their life, to have some kind of job where you just recognize just the absurdity of people's requests and just the frustration of people, and just put themselves on that side. And I feel like it's so obvious. People have not had that experience in my life, at least. Did you work as a server around here, or what did you?
Oh yeah. So in high school, I worked at the Holiday Inn, Holidome, and Conference Center, for those that remember that, in banquets. So that was probably my first job. It was part-time, as needed, with different events. It paid great. And yeah, so started there. And then after high school, worked at the front desk and learned that operation of the business. And I did that off and on for about 4 years before I moved more seriously into that career, into sales.
So start a little earlier. Were you born around here? Where
Yeah,
did you
so
grow up? Where'd you go to
my
school?
family originated in D.C. suburbs. My parents grew up in Silver Spring, Wheaton. So early life in Germantown, and then moved to Frederick in 5th grade. So that was a pivotal life event for sure. Going to Green Valley, and very different from my Montgomery County elementary school, open classrooms, and just different demographic.
What do you mean by open classrooms?
So Green Valley and, the old Green Valley, it's now been torn down. And oddly enough, Myersville, same footprint, because when I walked my kids in there, it was like the Twilight Zone. I was walking into 5th grade. So they've got, I guess, what you'd call temporary walls. So the classrooms are open in between, but they've got like a partition. So you walk in, and the library is an open space. You can see where all the different classroom areas are. But yeah, that's what open footprint.
How did they? I mean, that means like a kid yelling in this classroom is like, or
I think it works better than people realize.
Yeah.
I think
all I'm imagining right now is just 3rd graders
for sure
yelling at 2nd graders
for
across
sure.
a wall, above a.
And I think it teaches kids also that we're respecting the classroom next to us. So, if we know we're doing a loud activity or so on and so forth, or this class doing a test, it requires collaboration for teachers and students. So
I have to have a teacher on and ask if that's a nightmare or not.
Yeah,
because it has to be. It's got to be different than.
Reach out to Myersville Elementary, because they are still in that setup. Yeah.
Okay, so grew up around here. Where'd you go to high school?
Yep. So then Windsor Knolls was middle school, which was brand new, and Urbana was brand new. So after that school built in the 70s, I moved on to brand new Windsor Knolls, brand new Urbana, which was the only thing there.
But I'm pretty sure those first couple years of Urbana, you had quite a football team, right? Zach Brown, and wasn't there some
Zach Mills?
Zach Mills, yeah, that's what it was. Zach Brown, he's a singer.
Yeah.
Zach Mills, went to Penn State or something. And
yep, Zach was in my grade, so we were staggered start. So one class started before us. The class of 99 was the first graduating class, and then each year they added a grade. So it was just 2 of us, 2 levels when we started.
So only 9th graders, and then only 9th and 10th graders?
Yep, and then 9, 10, and 11. So those first 4 classes are all pretty close, just because it was a different start.
And the whole building was built out. It just wasn't full yet.
Yep.
Oh, man.
There was a whole wing we didn't use the first year.
That must have been quite an experience.
Not something that, most people experience. And
Okay. So past high school, what'd you end up doing for job, career?
Yeah.
You didn't go very far. You're still here.
I am school, went to a year of community college down there and then moved back. And I had my first kiddo pretty early. So I was just about to turn 20 when I had my oldest.
Wow.
And so, you know, that's a different start to adulthood. I was an adult very quickly. And backing up even a little bit more, I had a parent with very severe mental illness. So even middle school, high school, I would say I was parentified and very much on my own. And that's, I say Frederick County raised me. I do use that a lot, because if it wasn't for the friends that I had, their parents, the school counselors that I had, and teachers, coaches, fall into a path that wouldn't have turned out the way that I have and been as successful.
The community showed up, though.
I do in terms of, maybe not in terms of resources, but in terms of people and the circles that I was in and the sports that I did play and was a part of, for sure. I had a school counselor in high school that was...
Do you think that is still, you know, that sense of community? Because I think about, and part of it has to do with maybe church and, you know, some kind of social civic associations that we are a part of that were like much bigger when I was a kid. You know, like I think about kind of the things that were attached to like the Catholic Church and stuff. That I was never Catholic, but my grandparents were, so we would go to Knights of Columbus luncheons and these things. And I'm now a part of, wonderfully, the Marine Corps League.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's 8 or 9 gentlemen in the room that are all slightly older than myself. And, you know, it's not these like giant social gatherings the way it were.
Third spaces, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you still have the Elks and you still have the Moose. I mean, there's still all organizations like that. But it feels to me like when I'm in those spaces that the organizations are aging, and there may be one or two, maybe, you know, strange people like myself who are like participating in these things, but that our generation, kind of Gen X, the millennials, beyond, I mean, is it that they have no interest in this? I
mean, I think there's a shift in the environment. So, right, like we didn't have social media. I mean, we didn't have phones. You know, we're this last generation where those things weren't around, and we've grown up, you know, having them come online.
Yeah.
So I think we can't ignore that.
Yeah, that we were like forced, like the only way to hang out with your friends was to go do it.
Yeah.
Like to schedule it.
And I remember that being a lifeline. Like, nobody get on the phone. I need a friend and I want to be able to get out of this house. Where now, maybe you've got a cell phone, you've got, you know, a laptop that you can reach out and talk to other people. So you could be very isolated.
The thing to me that is the craziest is I used to come home and you'd say, "Hey, is anybody home?" You'd like holler that into the house. And I think that now it's we know where everyone is all the time. Especially, I mean, I have my father LoJack.
Sure.
You know, he doesn't live in my house, but like I know where he is, right? I don't have any kids, but I probably would LoJack him, you know, and whatever device they have, I would have access to.
Yeah.
And so there's no like.
And certainly parenting with all of that is a completely different animal too.
Yeah. So what do you think about this? I think the governor is gonna sign this no cell phones in school.
Oh, really?
I think, I think it passed and he's going to sign it. So
I'm all for it.
All for it? Yeah.
I don't think that we need them in school. And I think I've been looking at a lot of data recently, and in school, being in these psychology classes, it's very, very distinct where the testing and the data show that phones entered and one-to-one technology entered, and learning has been decreasing. And it's the first time they have a generation that's potentially learning less than the generation before them, which is terrifying, really.
So I remember, and this was kind of in my like college period of time. So this is the 2003, 2005 period of time where we were talking a lot about, well, I don't really need to have the facts and figures in my head because it's not, I can Google. Remember 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue anymore because I have eminently and we kind of thought about this, that like in our hands was going to be this level of technology where we could access it. And somewhere between that moment, now I admit I did go spend some time in overseas, like in Iraq, in between this, but at some point between that period of time where we said, oh man, we're going to be able to use this as a tool, it became like a weapon that the oligarchs, billionaires, et cetera, are using to extract attention.
It has moved faster than we've been able to react to it.
Correct. That we as humans simply have no, like we can't handle the amount of information that is coming at us in any given day.
Yeah, we weren't meant to.
And I really struggle with I don't want government to say you can't have access to this, right? I don't want government on any level to say you can't do a thing even to harm yourself, because it's not really, you get to decide if you eat 55 Big Macs in a day, that's okay, right?
Until that's causing harm, like driving a vehicle while intoxicated. And it is causing harm. So yeah, the struggle is figuring out where's that line.
And it's
hard.
I mean, it's such powerful technology that can be, think about the large language models and, learning about cancer and about how do we solve problems we never solved before, and we can solve them because we have this incredible amount of data and information.
Yeah.
I that is a wonderful thing. That'll save lives. But every time I get an email that's clearly written by AI, I just delete the email. Because it wasn't like a human being that sent me something.
Right.
That there was their thoughts and they're expressing.
Right.
And now back to the school of it, that, it's, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but like some giant percentage of things that are being submitted into the school system are all, like the teachers are having to run it through, un-AIing to go, well, that was AI.
Yeah.
And now the kids have a tool that'll fake it, so it's not AI.
And even that has shifted since I've been back at FCC. It was nothing at all to shifting, based on professor. Now it's, well, if you ran it through to check punctuation and spelling, you just have to state that you've done that. So it's even shifting, in higher ed in those ways. So nothing saying you don't have to cite your source, but that you can use these tools because they can't regulate. I mean, they're not going to be able to police that.
Yeah, I guess we did have Word, and we would run it through spell check.
Yeah.
Right?
This is just a way more...
That was a technology that allowed
way
us
more effective than it was then, but yeah.
Well, certainly, yes. So I'm very concerned about this because...
I think we all should be. And I had this conversation with a professor recently about we're not ready for it, we weren't meant to handle it. And they offered this perspective, which I think helped me, the sky is falling, maybe curb that a little bit. And that was we weren't ready for the Industrial Revolution either. And people were losing limbs and life in machinery and things of that nature. And then came labor unions and, workforce regulations and the things we have now to keep those things from happening. So it's sort of a modern day version of that, but it is scary.
I still feel pain for the people in between, because like the Industrial Revolution, well, a bunch of people would die in a fire.
Of course,
the Chicago, whatever, the textile mill went up, and well, now we know we need fire escapes and we need these things, but there's just so many people between now and then that are going to be...
Self-regulation is very, very hard.
Yeah. No, very much so.
It's very much like a drug, and I think more and more the experts are looking at it that way, and we are trying to figure out how do we have this tool, use it to our benefit, and not to our detriment.
Well, I'm very interested to know over the next couple of years the effect on testing scores and behavior and things in the school system if it's been removed. And I know all of our fellow parents and I know our we're really you only get a couple minutes of screen time, but it's like everything in our world is
a screen.
Through the screen, right? And so that digital native concept of understanding things, and there's so many cool little programs to teach people about programming and these skills that they're gonna need.
But we need to keep that at bay up until a certain development level in order to develop the way we, the most effective way. And so I think as a population and a community, if we're all doing that, it becomes easier. Yeah. If no kid is getting a phone till 8th grade, you don't have your 6th grader going, but all my friends have one. Yeah. So I think it has to be a pretty significant shift. Yeah. So again, just solving all the world's problems Dave.
But as I said, this is where I just, I just don't, where the role of government fits into the regulation. So sugar, right? So we go, well, should we say
it's all intertwined.
Should we say you can't have a certain amount of sugar in a drink, right? Well, again, I like the idea of people making their own decisions, but within, and this is like labeling, right? The idea of like, okay, if you have access to the internet, you have access to all these things, but like by law, every 15 minutes, something would pop up and go, you do realize you're destroying your brain. Okay, click here to accept the brain destroying, click here to turn off the device or something,
Yeah.
if we could end up on that space, but the problem is the profit motive, meaning the businesses and the people, like, they have no incentive. And they're hiring kids out of MIT and, psychology students to go, well, how do I get, right now I get 8 hours out of this person's attention. How do I get 9 hours out of this person's attention? And the millions and billions of dollars that are made off of that extra 5 minutes of your attention.
Yep.
And I just, it is a struggle because, again, it's also, I'm an eminently curious person. And so now I can, I can go down a rabbit hole of how many mice have been in space, right? And the reproduction of mice in space and all these things that, like, when I was a kid.
But is it real or is it AI?
And learning about sources. And so wonderful, segueing into kind of digital literacy, right? So, we don't have to get into any of the particular policies, but one of the things I see, especially in local government, national government, there's at least a little bit of, well, for now, professional journalism that occurs.
Yep.
But locally, we simply don't have the resources for it. And so I'm a fan of the FMP. I like them. I know I'm sure some people have stronger opinions about it. But the reality is they don't have enough reporters. They don't have enough people doing it. And they don't have enough people that have a expertise into the particular space that they're reporting on, right?
For sure.
So how do we get better information to the community? Could you solve that for me?
Can you solve it? Well, I think we've seen that over time. Not disintegrate, but you know what I'm trying to say.
I'm okay with the word disintegrate.
When I think about it, my earlier career, you read that newspaper every morning because you needed to know what was going on and what happened and how you were going to operate in your sales environment moving forward. And not that that isn't still there, but I do think we've seen the substance degrade, not disintegrate, but degrade. And if we're not getting young people interested in it in an ethical way and the meaning and purpose of it, then it's just going to continue dying off. So I think it's a multi-level.
Is this a responsibility of local government? Is it the responsibility of us is it just they should be operating and if we pay attention, okay, but
I think local government needs to do everything in its power to get communication out, period. What it's doing, where we're going, what's happening in the legislation. Maybe it's what businesses are looking to come here or things like that. But if people don't trust that, which I think we've seen a lot of recently, then what? So it doesn't matter what source it's coming from. We don't believe it anyway. There's always going to be that person, and so it becomes really frustrating.
Yeah, kind of the tribalism of it, that it's like if it's my team saying it, then I'm going to believe it, and if it's not my team saying it, then I'm not going to.
I want to believe that my representatives, at least at the local level, A, are accessible, B, they're responsive, and I can trust what they're saying.
One of the things I talked a lot last year about kind of during the city election was, we show up as a community sometimes like too late, meaning whether or not it was a good idea for any particular thing to be passed or any policy or decision to be made, or we see, especially, just speaking in the city, we see something, going up on Jefferson Street and we go, oh my God, this is being built. But the reality is that like a year and a half, 2 years earlier,
or more,
there were all these like conversations that we, again, I don't think that the city or the county is not like doing their due diligence. Like I think that they're putting it in the newspaper, like
of course.
They're saying, hey, here's notice for 2 weeks. And probably, there was a lot of discussion around the cricket stadium and all that about how, well, the sign for the meeting, there was some weeds in front of it. And I think that I don't think that the city was trying to hide it. I think that they put it there, and then 5 months passed and something grew in front of it.
Right.
And so
they met the requirement, and things happen.
But we have such little, how would I say this? We have such little understanding of how the impact,
tolerance.
Well, I'm saying the impact of what those local decisions are.
Oh, yeah.
Until it's right in our face.
And then we have zero tolerance, and how dare they?
Yes. So how do we, this is obviously unsustainable, right?
Correct.
So how do we get through that?
I mean, for me, I think I had the same mentality. And then I went through Leadership Frederick, which even if you've lived here your whole life, this is what I always tell people, whether you're brand new or you lived here your whole life, you're going to take away so much from it. It's just more than any of us are gathering along our regular life path, unless you're in government. And during that, I forget which day it was, but, we took a bus ride down 40 and all through different parts of the county. And through this, they're teaching us what you're seeing here was this was in the plan 25 years ago and just now is coming to fruition. And so I think there's a lack of understanding about how far out things are planned, and then when the project comes online and how long that project's going to take and when it's going to be done. And so lack of understanding that. And we're all busy. Everybody's living their life. Nobody is on the county website or Facebook page 24/7 oh, this is coming on. This is planned for next year or 5 years from now. And so we all have our own load that we're carrying. So
what's the solution? How do we?
I think we have to get creative. I've thought a lot about this recently, and I don't want to give you all my secrets, Dave.
Sure.
But
you are running for a public office.
So. Because I hear over and over again, I have heard this over and over the last year. There wasn't communication, or it wasn't in a way that it caught attention, or I received it and nobody said anything. Okay, fair. We definitely know, all the legalities were met. We were posting things, Yeah,
which I said earlier. I think.
But we're in 2026.
Whatever the rules are that were written in the 80s or the 50s.
Are the rules meeting the needs of today in 2026? My sense is probably not. And so my thoughts are, why don't we have a subscription? If somebody really wants to know what's going on in District 1, so maybe there's one for each district. You're concerned about what's happening in District 1. You're signing up for this text messaging information, just like I have for FCC, just like FCPS has Find Out First, and you find out school's closed tomorrow. Okay, this project is going to have a planning commission hearing this date, and so on and so forth. And so if you want those real time in your hand, we have that now. So let's make it happen.
I think it's across the board, meaning it's not just the local.
There's no one solution.
Yeah, but that it's just everyone, that there's just misinformation everywhere. And to your point about, is it AI? Who knows? What's being put out there right now. You can just go put in a prompt and say, hey, give me a press release that looks like it's from the Georgia State, House or whatever I don't know what their version of government.
And it might be harsh, but just because you're not paying attention doesn't mean something was done incorrectly or it wasn't put out for the public.
I think, as I said, to me, the solution has to encompass those people that weren't paying attention in the first place. Yep. So again, I agree that there is some responsibility on people to pay attention. Yeah. I always tell the story that I grew up in Boundary Creek, and I wonderfully grew up where Boundary Creek Elementary was behind our house, and a giant farmer's field was off kind of the other behind our house. And I was very young, and we would stand in that. You could look all the way over to the mountains, and I would sit there, and my father, and he would look at it, and he'd say, son, how beautiful is this? Beautiful country, and you see some cows over there, and he goes, and it's all going to be houses. And because he was paying attention to what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So he said, we're going to enjoy this period of time in which, he built that house. It was there was nothing else around. But he said there's going to be houses. And now, if I go back and visit there, 15 feet from where I was standing is somebody's backyard, right? And then there's an entire Boundary Creek overlook and all that still there. And they're still building in there, right? Yeah. And so certainly there's some responsibility there.
For sure.
But I also think to your point about that there is technology differences and changes that we need to be, everything in
Two
government
things can
is
be
so
true.
slow, and
Yep.
that we really need to be. There's no town square anymore. So back to the thing about the third spaces, where are people hanging out? And it's not in the bars the way there were, right? So our generation is the last drinkers, right? And even all of us are now
It is
gummies now.
the trend,
and not,
for sure.
So the generations coming after us are not. Everybody's down at the local watering hole, and everybody hears about somebody's, kid got married, or somebody graduated, or somebody passed, or all those kind of things. That none of that information. It's technology is trying to be that. Facebook is trying to be that, or Twitter, or whatever, X,
Absolutely.
or whatever they are. But it's kind of incumbent upon us as a community to start finding places to hang out, but also, and not to complain about the world, but it seems to be a low tolerance for the effort that it takes to, for example, I'm a big fan of transit, and I talk about how, the county is, which I don't know if you're for or against, but the county is now funding it. So it used to be
Absolutely.
COVID money from the federal government, and now the county is
Very
so
much
it's free.
for it.
So everywhere in Frederick County,
free.
it's free
Yep.
buses, right? But it's going to drop me off, and I'm going to have to walk 100 feet to the store as opposed to driving and parking right in front of it and walking in. And to me, no, I'm not talking about accessibility. I'm not talking about people, elderly. I'm not talking about anybody.
Right.
We should have 15 handicap spots in front of every place. That the only people driving should be people that need handicaps. But how, is it? Are we just? It's just we're never going back. Is it just that microwave? This idea of the microwaving food was the original sin, right? That as soon as we could have instant food, we thought, well, why doesn't everything else in our life be instant?
Instant gratification.
Yeah.
We want everything like this.
So are we just?
I think there's a reckoning. We've got to have a focus on how do we provide these things. And how do we help people realize that they're there and they're becoming more accessible and there's more routes? And, I think, people that just don't want to and aren't going to. Then there's people who maybe would, and it's not been a part of their life or where they've grown up. And so as we expand it, I think Frederick County has done an amazing job, just my own perspective from not having any transit.
Yeah, but there's this stigma.
Having that mom who would not take me to a job. I had to get a job in Monrovia that I could walk to. Let me tell you what the choices were. 7-Eleven, the Citgo gas station, the Green Valley Video. I mean, there's only so many places a 14, 15-year-old's going to get hired.
Yeah.
So now, and please don't quote me on the bus routes, but I think that it is expanding, if not all the way to there, but you've got more options for what, and for our, for seniors. And
I could spend 15 hours on
you probably
admonishing people about we need to change the stigma, and it requires more people riding because ridership is how we understand and get more funding, and how we get more investment. And if we don't ride, then we get less. And they go, well, we don't need a bus stop there because we don't have as many people. Well, it's because we don't have any many people because we don't have a bus stop there. Whereas if we had a bus stop, and
we do want to be a rural community, we do want to preserve and have these spaces. We can have both.
Yeah. So how much of this is the state of Maryland doesn't fund us enough compared to other states? I know that there's a funding issue both at Frederick County Public Schools, that we don't get the same.
Where isn't there a funding issue?
But maybe it's just my impression, but it feels to me like the state of Maryland does not invest in us the way they do in Montgomery County and they do in Baltimore. I assume it's just votes, meaning the governor gets elected out of Montgomery County, not out of Frederick County, the comptroller, et cetera. But is there a role for the county council to go and advocate for that?
For sure, and I think that we have been. I think our county executive has been, and the relationship is certainly better. Frederick is heard much more than we used to be. I think all of our delegation, both our Democrats and our Republicans, are very active and very much advocating for funding. 15 We got that funding back after hopefully it stays. It's an accident every day.
You just don't know anything that's like, it's fun for a year from now. It goes, well, what's going to happen a year from now?
Right. And I do think that for the most part, our elected officials are on top of that. And certainly I'm not planning on stopping that. We have got to get those projects where they need to be and where they needed to be 10 years ago, because it's already far past when we should have widened 15 and we should have, fixed infrastructure and gotten 15 South taken care of. We've got Bassford Road and 15 South where there's no light and still, it's like playing chicken across the road.
I have talked often about this, that, one of those funding issues is the, back when it was the county commissioner board, in most jurisdictions in Maryland, you are able to charge a different rate for commercial properties than for residential properties. In Frederick County, because of the county commissioners, they not only reduced that difference to like zero, but they actually removed it from our code. So we are not allowed, Frederick County government is not allowed to charge a different rate to a for-profit commercial building, rental, etc. And again, don't quote me on this, but I think it's like 80%, 70 or 80% of the burden of services in Frederick County are on
80.
residential properties. And we have all these people that are saying, oh, I'm getting priced out of my house. I agree. I live in the city, so I'm paying city and county property tax. And yes, it is, as the assessments go up, we are certainly paying a lot more in taxes. But to me, it's because we can't charge businesses. That is...
I think the personal property tax, right? So they do pay a property tax.
They pay a property tax, but it's the same rate as a residential property.
Right, okay.
And they can't, and most jurisdictions in Maryland, they can charge a higher rate for commercial property. But because the county commissioners removed it, essentially we have to go back to Annapolis and get Annapolis, the state legislature has to give us permission again. And this has historically been stymied by the fact that half of our delegation doesn't want to do this. So that's District 4. That's the Republicans in District 4. And I just, to me,
there has to be there has to be a balance. And it can happen having a different rate. I mean, we're not saying we're going to charge them 50% more. I think a slight increase is going to help no matter what. I don't see why that's an unreasonable.
I'm okay with some fairly high differences, but I'm not running for county council.
But I understand when you're a small business owner, as I'm sure you do, that could be a make or break situation if you're not planning for that. And so I can see where two things can be true. So how do we do that? Is it a sliding scale? Is it,
Well, however we slice that pie, I just think that the burden should move away from the residential properties as much as possible.
Yeah.
That we should move them to properties that are worth a certain amount, or we should have, especially people, like the way they do in New York, where if you don't live there the whole time, then that is not your primary residence, and why should you be paying the same tax rates? Because you're getting all of the benefit of everything we're doing here in the community that is increasing all of your value, but you are not contributing back anything more than the people that are using the roads every single day that are around. So that's why I'll get off my soapbox. But that's,
and I think I agree with you.
That's just one of the things that I just think needs to change.
But also continuing to attract businesses and industry and growing that commercial base is a big part of it.
So how do we do that?
Well, I think we are doing it. I think our Department of Economic Growth, I think is what it's now called, but Economic Development, has had a phenomenal team. I think we now have a leader at the helm who's very Frederick focused and centric and from here and has a ton of experience locally and state level. And the team is going to keep attracting what we currently have. They have great relationships with the current industry that we have here, life sciences and biotech and all of those things, and we can have more. And they're doing that work. And who wouldn't want to live in Frederick?
We are the fastest growing. Clearly everyone wants to live here.
It's great. Who wouldn't want to?
So one of the problems when you become the place that everyone wants to live is no one can afford to live here anymore, right? So the supply of houses compared to the demand on those houses is so very great. So I'll tell you a little now, Jenn. I'd love to hear kind of how do we solve this? So I was doing a listening tour wonderfully with the Asian American Center. We were in Hillcrest, and we were just talking to residents. And one of the things that they kept bringing up was kind of the population explosion that's happening there. And I was thinking, just because of my relationships in the trades, and I was like, I don't really feel like there's a lot of building happening in there. So where do they live? So that was my question was, well, you say there's so many more people and so many more kids, but where do they live? And she was a teacher, and she said what's happening is in the drop-off line in the morning that a car's showing up and 2 or 3 families worth of kids are coming out of it, and that they're all living together inside of these spaces. So that is not sustainable.
That's not a solution.
That is not a solution. Is that we simply are overcrowding the stock that we have. So how do we?
And now it's happening even more.
So how do we make Frederick more affordable to live?
Well, we have our housing needs assessment. So the tool is there, the data is there, and the strategic plan is constructed. We can't let it sit on a shelf. We've got to implement those things. And just from the last few meetings that I've watched, our housing department is already trying to start utilizing tools that maybe we weren't utilizing and now we are. House Keys for Employees is a program that actually my husband and I used to buy our first home in Frederick City in 2009. We wouldn't have had the money as a police officer and a hospitality associate to buy a home, and we did, and that was through the city, and it's matched, and so those were being used then. Funding sort of went by the wayside, and I think maybe that program got put on the shelf. Now they're saying, well, we could probably bring this back out and use this again. So I think that's pieces of it where we've got things already and we can just re-implement them, as well as new strategies that we've changed. So in Brunswick, you've got Railroad Square, where it's public, private, and nonprofit partnership, and it's income level restricted. It's a beautiful building, and it's been an amazing addition to downtown Brunswick, adding people that, live there, go to school there, and can work there as they continue to grow and have businesses there. So it's multifaceted.
Do you think that's replicable around the county, what's happening in Brunswick?
Oh, I definitely think so. I think we're doing that in the city of Frederick as well, going on a tour next week of a couple of properties. So it is replicable, and it's a good thing where we're infilling all different types of housing, whether that's apartments, single family, townhomes, where the infrastructure already exists. You've got transit and you've got jobs, and you've also got a way to get to, the Maryland transportation options as well. So you've got MARC, and you can go down the road if that's what you have to do and not have to drive. So infilling where that infrastructure already exists has to keep happening.
What about everything else? So, obviously housing, in my opinion, it's a supply issue.
Oh, it's definitely a supply issue.
There's programs, right, that help individual people. We simply don't have enough money to help every single person.
For sure.
Achieve, living in a place that's too expensive, right?
For
so
sure.
like we could subsidize people up to this out of control market, but that's not the
And my own
solution.
oldest child also, experienced that. They can't buy a house in Frederick County because townhouses are $500,000.
Yeah.
That's the reality. And so supply is the issue. We don't have enough, so people are going to get those prices.
So
I
certainly want to hear any more about supply things.
Yeah.
But what about everything else? Because, childcare and groceries, right? So forgetting, I don't think the county council has any control over.
Yeah, do you want me solving every federal,
right?
state level program we need to have in place?
I don't think that you guys are in charge of the war in Iran, but things like that are going to happen.
1,000%.
So how do we, as a community, harden ourselves for that? Like
Sure.
How do we survive locally when we have no control over the price. Right. Fuel goes from it's $3 to $4, right? Now I think I saw today that like crude oil is like at 120. It's going to be like 200, right? Okay.
My plug-in hybrid is my favorite thing right now.
So I wish I had an EV right now.
I know.
So we can't fix the Strait of Hormuz, right?
Right.
So how do we as a community and in a potential role in local government,
absolutely,
what should the government be doing to, again, I'm going to use that word, harden ourselves, right? Against, maybe harden isn't the right word, like
prepare
ourselves.
Yeah.
What could
we can't put our heads in the sand. We have to, reality is what it is. And I think paying attention and utilizing what we are benefiting from. So we have grown and there is opportunity happening here, but we're not immune from the cost. We're not immune from the federal shutdown. We're not immune from how many hundreds of thousands of federal workers being laid off. And all of that is affecting our entire region. We've done a really good job of responding. For instance, the HART grants that we implemented pretty darn quickly for nonprofits who are serving to make sure that families are getting food, and utility assistance and rent payment assistance. So yes, those things are triage. Long term, we have to continue to have sustainable industries and schools and know where the funding is coming from and not just on a hope and a prayer, we're going to make it next year. We can ignore the elephant in the room, but we have a huge windfall coming from the data centers. And that tax revenue might just be what keeps us from catastrophe in terms of being able to harden ourselves. Because it's hard right now. My fear is what happens when it gets harder. If we have a food crisis, we're going to depend.
Certainly costs are not going down.
No.
Right?
No.
So yeah, back to our conversation about the kind of alerting people and letting people know, I am of the opinion that we have been dealing with this process for a long time. Whether or not I agree with where we stand, we have certainly been dealing with, and I grew up in Boundary Creek, so I remember when East Alco was an aluminum smelting plant and all these things and heavy industrial and all that. But there are some, there's fear, right? So regardless of what you would say is accuracy or not towards that information, there's this fear that what we have, our home, our peace, our health, et cetera, is being taken away for profit. So there's probably two paths, right? So one path is through the legal process, they say we can't deal with it whatsoever and it doesn't end up on the ballot. There's still going to be a giant set of people that have all that fears and those concerns. The other is that it does end up on the ballot. And so now we have a conversation for the next 5 months about this fear that's in the community. So what is the role of the county council that's coming in, right? Which is going to include some people that voted for or against, depending on if Mason gets in or Brad gets in. So what do you think the role of the county council will be in January?
Well, it's hard to say without knowing where we're going in terms of what that decision is. So a little bit of it is wait and see because we can talk about different scenarios. We don't know what scenario we're going to get. Yeah. I think either way, you have to look at these elected officials, all of us, and say, what is the ability to produce the best outcome for the most amount of people, for all of our residents, because they all matter. Adamstown matters. The area all around that development matters. We have to be, I think, more timely with information in terms of what is true and create an environment where people believe and trust that information is true. We've gotten so far from that. It's hard to know how we can get back to it.
So what do you say to that person who has that fear, right? Again, regardless of where you stand on the accuracy of that information.
Tell me
why.
That
person comes to you and says, I live in this house. I think that this is happening right next to me, and I'm worried for my kids. What is I
want to provide that person factual information. And what about that information scares you? What can we get you? What information can we provide? What would be enough, I think, is the question at this point.
It's certainly, I'll use the word a pickle, right?
Yeah.
That it's certainly a situation where you have very strange, what do they say, politics is strange bedfellows, right? So you have people that historically would have been on two sides of a picket line that are half of them are sitting on this side and half of them are sitting on this side, and there's all sorts of these again, just people that are picking a team, right, and choosing a side. And my concern is that my concern is it's the salience of if you're right there, right? So depending on where you live, certainly any development, data center, fire station, because it's gonna, train tracks, or the MRP, right? So like the
MPRP,
yep. the power lines. This is all very salient to somebody who that power line is going to go through their property. But the person that lives a mile north of that, who has a bunch of trees between them and that property, has such less, internally, it's not as real to them.
Right.
But at the same time, same thing with benefits, right? So
and it's change, right? So yeah, there was industry there before, but we didn't have to see the building right behind the school.
Yeah.
And so it's change. It's a growing pain. That happens with any type of growth. We're experiencing growing pains. The talk about data centers started a decade ago. This was not a new conversation. This whole project that is coming to fruition right now, 5 years ago, before this current council, this council paused it, put a moratorium on it, stopped everything. Leadership changed. The project was having, I think, some leadership issues. And so we had this pause. It's not as if the process has been bulldozed and no safety measures have been put in place. All those things were looked at and considered. And now we're moving forward, I think, in a more educated way. This technology is not the same technology we're seeing horror stories about, which are valid. We should be worried about noise and water and electric and all the strain on the surrounding area. I also think Frederick looked at it and said, we want to know more and we want to know how we avoid this, and is doing that to the best of our ability. That doesn't mean we don't keep looking at it.
So one of the concerns, and obviously energy, the increase in energy costs that we're experiencing now has nothing to do with future data centers, right? So setting aside what potentially could be the future cost.
That's again a bigger, taller problem that we don't have.
One of the really salient things that's happening is the electricity is going up, right? My electric bill is going up. So
mine too.
How do we, as a community, tackle that? Is this should we be doing solar? Should we be doing, Thermont has their own utility, right? So there's kind of some co-op buying happening in Thermont. Is that something the city should be doing? Microgrids, et cetera.
I think everything should be on the table. Why wouldn't we do everything that we had in our toolbox? I don't think we're far from saying you have this 2,600 acre campus and we want to see you generating. No, solar panels might not be able to power a data center, but certainly it's got surface area where we could put solar panels that are generating something. And I think that they should be. I think that's being a responsible neighbor. And
what about like government buildings and those such?
Also. Yeah. And I think we are doing that. We've implemented a lot, and we need to keep doing that.
Again, it's just what a we're not. This isn't the federal government, right? But
right.
In my mind, we should be just so subsidizing these other alternative sources of energy, and then going to all the other countries in the world and saying, "Hey, we'll buy our solar panels, we'll subsidize it, and make it cheap." And
right.
But I don't think that Frederick County Council is responsible for that. But but it is just like the water, just like all these other resources that we have that are inflexible demand. I think about this with housing, that if I'm gonna buy a guitar, if you have a guitar and you're willing to sell it for $100, and I think that that thing is worth, I'm going to give you $100 for it. Well, that guitar is worth $100, right? Because you're willing to give it for that, and I'm willing to spend that money. But it's a flexible demand. Right. I don't need the guitar, right? No matter how much I want to play it, I don't need it. I want it, and so it works. The economy works when supply and demand and all these other things. But there are things that are inflexible demand. So like housing, you need it, right? And in my opinion, is a human right.
Absolutely.
That you have a roof over your head and a door that you can close and privacy in your space. And it feels to me like we've allowed back to the billionaires and the tech oligarchs, and it's just we've allowed the amount of wealth to just get sucked out of the economy, sucked out of the actual real lived economy so much that we now are fighting over the scraps of what we have left and trying to use our little bit of resources to pay for food, to pay for, and then now we have to have all these nonprofits and all these charities and churches and civic organizations that are feeding people and shelters and all these things that are just like, we have enough bananas for everyone, but they're just not in the right place. Do you see government as, this phrase we use in the DSA, we're like mutual aid. Is this something that the government should be more involved in locally? Is this something that the government should be taking tax dollars and funneling them to nonprofits to do?
Oh, okay.
Is it something that the government shouldn't be involved in at all? We should be working to lower taxes so that the people have more. Like, where do you fall in that? Where along that spectrum do you fall?
Well, I don't think we need billionaires. That's where I fall, first of all. Oh. If you want to go really, really big.
Agreed. We don't have many in Frederick, so.
Well, yeah, there's that. It's a tough question. It's a tough question. I think there's a balance somewhere in there. Who wouldn't want their taxes lower? I would love to be able to give more of my money away. That would make me very happy in life. Yep. What's my passion? Making sure other people are taken care of. So,
but is it the most efficient, right?
I think yes. Not the answer is yes, but that is the question.
Yeah.
I think we are more efficient than we used to be. I think we can be efficient. I think it's possible. It's interesting having legislated for things at the federal, state, and local level over the last few years. And government is very quick when it wants to be. We wrote COVID legislation with a lightning bolt. So it's possible. And so whenever somebody tells me, that's going to take this number of years or whatever, and I go, oh, really? I'm not taking that for an answer. Where there's a will, there's a way. And so if we need to do something quickly, it can happen. Now, back to your question about should government be doing that? No, we need to create an environment where people are thriving, and we don't need to funnel however much through the government to the nonprofits. There's always going to be a place. Yes, there's going to be need. We're never going to, not never. We would like to be able to solve all of this. But the reality is that there is going to be an element of this that exists, and for the foreseeable future. And so we get everything's flipped in the House, in the Senate, in the White House, in the Supreme Court. And I digress. But lost my train of thought.
Well, I agree that if
everyone's thriving, we have less of a need for government to do these things.
It's like
that's
anything
what I meant
where
to say.
if you pull this knob, well, this pressure goes up, and like every it's a giant puzzle that is all interlinked with different layers of government and different communities and different states and all those things.
And if you create those paths, people will take them.
Yeah, and I 100% yes. But certainly, if we look back in the long arm of history here in Frederick County, that mistakes have been made, right? So
no one's perfect.
We didn't plan everything correctly. We didn't plan everything remotely correctly, right? So mistakes were made. So talk about where in your life where you've made mistakes and how you then kind of how do you deal with the realization. Now, maybe your answer, and I'm not saying this it is, but maybe your answer is I have never been wrong. But
of course
in
not,
those,
Dave.
those moments where you have, how do you treat that? Because one of the things that I look for in representatives is people that say, I want the right thing to happen, not I want to be right.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that every candidate is going to sit here over the next couple of weeks with me, and they're all going to say, well, of course I am this way.
Right.
But give me some actual examples of times you've been wrong and how you kind of dealt with that.
I'm going to be thoughtful with my answer.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, I can't give you all my flaws in one sitting. I think being a parent is probably the easiest place to pull that from. Parenting is hard. It is the hardest job. I have said I've been parenting basically my entire adult life.
Yeah.
It is not for the weak or the faint at heart. It will break you in more ways than I think any of us can imagine, for all different reasons. And it's hard as a parent to say you were wrong. It is a very humbling experience to go back and apologize to your kid. And I have done that many times because none of us are perfect. Sometimes it's easier than others, depending on what the situation is. But also with your spouse or your partner. So this is just, and this kind of popped in my head and it speaks to a couple of different things. So imagine we're in 2020 and I am running the Town Place Suites by Marriott here in Frederick. Okay. So I'm running a 24-hour hotel operation. I was the GM at the time. And Stu is now the acting lieutenant at FPD, one of two over the patrol division.
Okay.
So you've got a 24/7, all the shifts, day, night, and evenings in patrol during a global pandemic. So now I'm running a hotel that has lost all its occupancy. We're laying people off. We're hoping we can bring them all back when it ends. And you have to have it staffed. So now maybe I'm working overnight here and there. And he's working the shifts his guys are working, guys and gals. And so you can imagine this is like primed for marital struggle. And then enters the George Floyd crisis and that situation, which resulted in, for many, maybe a distant memory now, but when you were living in the world of your spouse was going to work every day, knowing there was a protest that was going to happen, and those are the people there protecting everybody's safety, both people who were protesting and had that absolute right to do that, as well as the public. Thank God it was a pandemic because I don't think as many people were out. And the officers and the public safety personnel. And I'm a self-declared social justice warrior. So, we're handling all this ball of stress, and I'm coming home every day like, we've got to do better, and it is systemic racism, and this shouldn't be happening, and this is happening too much. And I'm talking to my Black moms and women who are also trying to solve, and I'm saying, the moms are going to solve all of this if everybody else could just get out of the way, give it to some mothers, and we'll handle this. And so we're having all these conversations and constructive conversations. I'm getting the firsthand account of what it was like down on Market Street that day, and how many people came out, and who he met, and how he was facilitating and being that bridge. And I looked at him one day and I could just see the fatigue on his face. He was dealing with 12-hour shifts of that, and then coming home, and I'm going, we have to solve this. And that is not, home should be a safe space, and it should be where you come to recover if that's what you're going to work to do every day. And it was not necessarily a mistake I made, but it was a moment where I went, we have to shift what we're doing at home, because this has to be safe for both of us, and it has to be a recovery space with the way the world is right now. Our kids are home, we're not home. We're still having to go out to work during that. And so I would say I'm maybe it's a place where I was recognizing that my behavior was not helpful and it needed to shift. So.
Okay. Now what are you most proud of?
Oh, gosh. Wait, are you trying to make me cry?
No.
Dave. Goodness, there's things in my life over it that I'm proud of from childhood on. And I would say resilience and my level of resilience that I've had to have my entire life has certainly armed me for struggles I didn't even imagine. I mean, maybe you imagine them, but you don't really understand them until they hit you. And that was, so having the mental illness background in my family led me to a place where I had found that I had put off my own mental health care in terms of, going and talking with a therapist like, hey, this stuff happened. And when the therapist looks at you and goes, how are you normal? Then you feel really validated.
Oh, yeah.
And so I have
been there.
Yeah. So I just started to really do that for myself and work on that. Probably a decade ago now. And, I wanted to be better for my kids and my husband and myself and be able to show up better. And that was going to be required. So I did that work. And the first thing that hit was our house fire. So we had a very severe house fire 11 months after moving into our forever home. And, middle of the night, like the thing you think is never going to happen, it happened. And had I not already been doing that work, that would have been much harder and already had been through some really hard things in life. So able to show up for our kids, rebuild our home, fast forward 3 years, and at 39, your spouse is gone.
Yeah.
And I thought even in the moments where that was happening, the first moments, I thought everyone needs to feel their feelings. And I was really present and very aware of where I was at in a mental state and that I needed to show up. And certainly, we all do things in moments of trial, but I would not have been able to show up the way that I did and have continued to and heal and move through that had I not done that work. So I'm very proud of that. And I think hopefully it sets an example for other people that it is possible and you have no reason to feel shame around that and go get that help and do that work. It will be better for you and those around you that you love. So.
What was, and take this however you want, but what was the most important lesson that you learned during any of those positions, any of those times and its piece? I mean, you talked about resilience being the thing you're most proud of, right? But what kind of salient lesson do you kind of refer back to the most?
Mm-hmm. So as you can imagine, all those things I've told you up to this point make me a very fiercely independent human being.
I can imagine.
Asking for help is hard. And I had to do that. There was not a way to survive those things without help. And I think even from, the times that I was talking about middle school and high school, I had to be reaching out to those friends. Like if I was just hiding in my house without anybody knowing and not asking for help or saying, hey, this is what's happening, then I would have been suffering, or my siblings and I would have been suffering there without any assistance. So I try to always teach my kids that too, because kids are pretty stubborn about asking for help at certain ages. And so hopefully I was modeling that for them too. And so asking for help.
All right, now here's an easy one. If you could snap your fingers, what would you change about Frederick County government, Frederick County, the way we do things? If you were queen for a day, and you, like you talked about, where government could move faster, right? If it really wanted to. So none of the vestiges. What would be the thing you would change?
Well, I would just grow all the money, Dave, and then take the property taxes away, and we would all have all the things we want immediately.
So the thing you would change is that everyone would be have $1 million instantly. Is
that
Maybe I'll rephrase
Can't we print money
that.
these days? Isn't there some way?
We do things a certain way.
For sure.
Right? According to our codes, according to our rules, the way the city and the county interact, the way the state and the county interact. But what would be something that you would change, again, about the region, about how we interact with other cities? I mean, anything. What would be something you'd change?
You're stumping
one
me.
Of those, the paralysis by where there's like so many options.
Yeah.
And things.
Like, I can't pick one thing. I think I would instantly solve this communication issue, because I think the transparency and the ability to lead people to trusting their local government leads to a better outcome for everybody. So I think if there was an instant way to make that happen, that's what I would want to see.
Awesome. All right. How do people get a hold of you?
Oh, my goodness. So many ways, accessible all the ways. JennAlcorn.com, 2 N's, JENN Alcorn.com, Facebook, Instagram, email. I'm available, ready to talk.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Dave.